Welcome to the Working Genius podcast, where we discuss anything and everything related to the 6 types of working genius and how it impacts your work and your life. I'm Pat Lencioni, your host, joined by the full crew today I tried to come up with a name for all 3 of you. It's Cotrebo. Cody,
Geniuses.
Tracy, and Bo. Cotrebo. But it's good to see you guys.
Good to see
We got
you.
Karen in studio. Yes, thank you, Tracy. Tracy, your mic isn't working, so you're using the computer mic. So if you sound a little echoey, that's why. Little
Yes.
technical issues. And we got Matt producing our show behind the screen, as we say. Cody, what is our topic today?
One of my favorite topics, grumpiness.
That's right. What does grumpiness have to do with working genius? Well, I was thinking about that. I didn't figure it out. I think I just realized last week that we know that people, when they're working outside of their genius too much, that's how this whole thing came about. I was grumpy a lot and I was like, why am I so grumpy at work? And we figured out it was because I was doing things outside of my area of genius. And most people think, yeah, that makes sense. But I think it's worth, and we'll see if this lasts an entire episode, but I do think it's interesting. Why do we get grumpy? Is it because we're like, I don't like doing this. I want to do what I want to do. That makes us sound kind of bratty or selfish. The reason we get grumpy when we spend so much time working outside of our genius is because it requires energy to be civil and to be patient. I mean, things like that require energy. And when our energy is getting drained, eventually one of the first things to go is going to be civility. And so grumpiness, when we're outside of our genius, is a very real thing because we don't have the energy to pay attention to kindness and civility. And I think it's worth understanding this because it can give us a little bit of relief. And so anyway, Bo, you had something to say.
Yeah, and just this understanding helps me understand myself better about when I'm getting grumpy at my children, hypothetically. And it also helps me understand when other people are feeling irritable. We've talked about on previous episodes that each genius has something that they crave. Galvanizers crave a response. Well, galvanizing is one of my geniuses. It's one of my wife's frustrations. But she still craves a response when she is trying to galvanize. So when she's trying to get my kids to put on their shoes, again, hypothetically, and they're all still building their Legos or reading their book or not responding to her saying, come on, let's go. She gets grumpy more quickly than I do because it's more draining. She still is craving that response and probably craving being seen of like, come on, I'm trying to help you guys. So you get to the grumpy a little quicker when you're working in something that's not in your genius.
Yeah, you're already in your reserves just doing something that doesn't give you energy. So it's going to be harder. And I think about parents that, like, a lot of childbearing. Karen, Tracy, tell us about what that's like, what geniuses you use there. But a lot of raising children, there's a lot of gene, eing, and teeing. And so people are like, well, how come other people have an easier time being patient with their kids that way? And I think if you looked at your working geniuses and you probably thought, you could say, oh my gosh, no wonder. Similarly, like, there's certain things I love to help my kids with. When they came to me and said, hey, Dad, I don't have an idea for the science fair or whatever else, I don't go like, oh, no. I'm like, are you kidding? This will be so fun. Or I have to write an essay about something. I need a topic. This is really fun for me. And for other parents, they might be like, oh, crap, I hate doing that. And since I just said crap, I notice that I swear more. I don't like to swear. I don't want to swear. I try not to swear. But I swear more when I'm working outside of my genius. And it's because I'm just so close to the edge of not having the energy to kind of think about what I'm saying.
Well, I think it's, this feels, as we're teasing this out, very core to the whole purpose of working genius, which is when you're in your genius, you have more joy and energy. Like, you could even just talk about tiredness even. I think all of us recognize that when we're tired, our propensity to be patient and kind, our ability, our capacity to be those things is greatly diminished. And so it makes sense that when you're working outside of your genius, that you're like, if you just did it on a scale, when I'm working in my genius, there should be a thought bubble or an energy bubble above my head that's like 10 out of 10. I love this. And so when things come at me, I have a little more patience and a little more civility, as you said, Pat. When I'm working in a frustration, it might as well say 2 of 10 or 1 of 10. And we all can relate to being in a situation where we're just too tired to care about how that's coming across. And so the result of that is perceived grumpiness or actual real grumpiness.
Yeah, think about how many people have had a teacher that say, oh, my third grade teacher was grumpy. And it impacts kids, right? And they might have chosen that profession for the wrong reason. And they might not have the geniuses that went with that job. Or the principal might have set up that classroom for a person that didn't fit. And so people go, she's just grumpy or he's just grumpy. And the truth is, actually, they're just in the wrong job. And it impacts others. And I know this sounds so obvious, but how much more grace can we have for people when they're doing work that they don't really like and how it impacts others? And how much more insight can we have? Like, you really should find something you love doing.
So are we giving people permission to be grumpy then? Because, we previously said that we all have to work outside our working geniuses. So if we have to do that, are we giving people the permission to be irritable at times?
No. Cody, what were you going to say?
Well, I think, Pat, I was with you a couple of days ago and this happened. And I think what it did is it gave a little more context and permission for forgiveness. Is we were together, Pat, and you called Laura, your wife, in the middle of her working way outside of her working genius, right? She's a wonder inventor at the top of the elevation. And you called with, and she's generous and kind and loving and all these things. And you called with this opportunity to be kind and loving. And because she was working outside of her genius, the response you got on the phone was not the normal Laura,
Right.
And I think that's the whole point of this, right? Is like to say, oh, wow. And then she, rightly so, she might have even inspired this podcast, said, hey, I'm so sorry. You just caught me while I'm working outside of my genius. And so I don't have the reserves to be as polite as I need to be in this moment.
Right. And to give a little context, so we were together as a team and we found an opportunity to do something really nice for somebody who needed help. And it was going to require the writing of a check. And so I called Laura thinking and Laura's super generous. And I was like, hey, Laura, we need a check and here's what it's about. And she goes, well, I'm not leaving. If you want to come by and get it, you can. I'm not bringing it to you. And I was like, whoa. And she's like, and why do you think you need to give that? She was kind of, and I was like, and you guys could hear me on the phone. I was like, are you okay? And she's like, I'm just doing the bills and I'm cleaning my office and I hate it. And I was like, oh, so it's not permission, but it's grace to understand why. And now if that were happening every day, you'd have to go, maybe we need to make a change in how you do things. But in that moment, it was just an explanation. So it's not an excuse, but it's an explanation. And it allows a person also to be self-aware, to give them self-grace about what's going on.
I actually think that when you understand what's going on, you might actually be less likely to be grumpy or irritable.
Yeah.
I was on a call on Friday, and we're doing this webinar for everybody who's been certified in Working Genius. Subtle pitch. Hey, if you come and get Working Genius certified, you get to come to cool events that we're going to do next week. Anyway, so I was getting to do some inventing and galvanizing, which are my geniuses. And then the call switched very quickly to being enablement and tenacity. And Krista Catrola, amazing human, was like, hey, your energy has tanked. What's going on? And I realized in the moment, if I don't define what's happening, which is we just changed the elevation, now we're working out of my frustrations, I was starting to get irritable at myself, at them, looking for some external factor to be like, why is this so tiring to me? And the minute she said it, it was like, oh, here's what's going on. Now I have language and kind of context for everything that's happening beneath the surface for me. And I'm less likely to just point the finger and blame somebody else for my irritation. Does that make sense? It's like knowing what was happening and the work I was doing actually made me a little less grumpy.
Well, you know what exacerbates grumpiness when you lose an energy is guilt. Throw on top of, I'm doing something that's draining, and now I feel bad about myself, and it's just a spiral. And I was thinking about, I don't mow my lawn. I have never mowed my lawn. And I think I'm like, I feel terrible about that. Right? I used to mow the lawn when I was a kid all the time. And I know my parents, my dad, God rest his soul, was like, I can't believe you don't mow your lawn. We have a gardener come do it. And I think, what a terrible person I am. But I'm horrible at it. It is the very things that I'm the worst at. Well, if I were mowing my own lawn, I would be out there cussing because it would be breaking and nothing would go well. And I'd probably break things in the yard and my wife wouldn't be happy. It's not that I think that mowing the lawn is beneath me. I suck at it and it makes me frustrated, and I should not do that. And so sometimes when we feel like I'm going to do it out of guilt, I need to do this because and then you're just making yourself do things that are only going to make you even madder. So yeah, it's about giving yourself and others grace, knowing that grumpiness is often a function of what you're doing. Cody.
Yeah, Pat, I'm doing this live. You can react to it, but we often talk about the fundamental attribution error, right? Which is you talk about like that. That's the idea that you attribute other people's negative behavior to their character. Like, oh, in this case, that's a grumpy person. Pat, who mows his lawn, is a grumpy human being. Where we give ourselves grace for attributing that to our environment. Like, oh, I'm only grumpy because I don't like this. I don't like this chore or whatever else it is. And I wonder if there's something like the working genius frustration attribution error, which is when people are working in their frustration, we see the grumpiness and we might be, inclined to say that's who that person is. And there's a very easy explanation, which is like, hey, Bo's kind of irritable on that call, or Pat's irritable out on that, with that mower. The explanation is, oh, they're working outside their genius. I have way more capacity to give them grace. And I think that's the handles for this podcast, right? Is like, one is what Bo said, if you're aware of it, you can be more tuned into like how you're coming across. The other is if we're aware of it for other people, we can be less judgmental and say, hey, this is sort of a circumstance situation where Pat is grumpy because we're asking him to work in his frustration. That's not who he is as a person.
Exactly. Now, and if a person is in a situation where they're grumpy a lot, they should make a change. And then you can say, hey, you deserve not to be grumpy, rather than saying, hey, change your personality. Now, there are some people out there, I suppose, who have personalities that are grumpier than others. But until you've allowed for all of the environmental factors, trying to get them to work on that is just, it's kind of cruel. It's kind of cruel. Tracy, tell us about, now you're a grumpy person. Tell us about But Tracy, tell us about is there something that goes on in your life that gosh, I do get grumpy and it's because I'm having to do stuff I don't like to do?
Well, absolutely. I know, Bo, you mentioned just parenting at home with your family, that I have to galvanize at home, and galvanizing is my last genius. Ooh. I absolutely cannot stand galvanizing. When I have to galvanize my husband or my children, it is awful. So, and I do get grumpy. The other thing that happens with me is I'll sometimes, the word irritable, that word resonates with me. I get irritable and then I shut down. So, when I cross the line, it's really bad. When I start to shut down, that's when it's gone really far. So yeah, I think anytime I'm galvanizing, it just sucks.
Right. A lot of people a lot of parents, but I think this is true in work as well. When you're a person that that has G in their lowest third as a frustration, they will say, people think I'm a nag. And now I realize what that is. It's like, no, it means when you're doing that, you are irritable and grumpy. And so it comes out that way. But there are people like Bo is a galvanizer. Karen's husband, Al, is a galvanizer. They're cheerful when they're trying to galvanize people. So it's just because it's not. And so we call it nagging, but it's really just galvanizing from a place of grumpiness. And that's absolutely understandable. It is absolutely understandable. All right. I think that's enough. I think this is interesting. Give others more grace. Understand yourself better. And when you do that, you'll avoid guilt, in which we talked about. Avoiding guilt is a big part of working genius, and it will actually allow you to be less grumpy when you're working outside of your genius. All right. I hope that's helpful to everybody. Thanks for listening. We appreciate it. We'll talk to you next time on the Working Genius Podcast. God bless.